If you want to know more such history, like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned. A cold wind swept across the snow-covered streets of Gori, a small Georgian town deep in the Russian Empire, as a child was born who would one day shape the fate of millions. His name was Yoseb Jugashvili. The world would later know him as Joseph Stalin. Born into poverty in 1878, the boy grew up in a world of hardship, violence, and fear. His father, a shoemaker, drank heavily and often beat him. His mother worked tirelessly as a laundress, clinging to the hope that her son might rise above misery. But the boy who limped through the streets of Gori carried wounds deeper than anyone knew. In school, Stalin discovered books, stories of heroes, rebels, empires, and revolutionaries. They awakened something powerful inside him. Teachers saw intelligence, ambition, and a quiet intensity. His mother sent him to a church seminary, dreaming he would become a priest. But inside those walls he found something far more dangerous: the writings of Karl Marx, Lenin, and radical thinkers who believed the old world must be burned down to build a new one. Stalin abandoned religion and embraced revolution. He joined the Bolsheviks, a secret underground movement led by Vladimir Lenin. While others debated ideology, Stalin worked in the shadows, printing illegal newspapers, organizing strikes, and coordinating robberies to fund the cause. He faced arrest repeatedly. He was beaten, imprisoned, exiled to Siberia. But each time he grew tougher, more ruthless, more certain of his destiny. He learned how to survive, how to manipulate, how to hide every emotion behind a face of stone. When the Russian Empire collapsed in 1917, Stalin returned to Petrograd as the world he knew cracked open. The Tsar was gone. Revolution swept the streets. Lenin rallied the Bolsheviks to seize power. Stalin helped coordinate the takeover of railways, banks, and government offices. In the chaos of the civil war that followed, he proved himself willing to do whatever it took to win. Villages burned, prisoners were executed, dissent was crushed. His methods horrified some, but Lenin saw usefulness in his cold efficiency. In 1922, Stalin was appointed General Secretary of the Communist Party. The role seemed insignificant, administrative, safe. But Stalin understood its real power. He carefully placed loyal allies into key positions, slowly tightening his grip on the machinery of the state. When Lenin suffered a series of strokes, Stalin controlled access to him. He shaped what Lenin heard, and more importantly, what the party heard from Lenin. Before his death, Lenin tried to warn the party that Stalin was dangerous and should be removed. But Stalin ensured that warning stayed buried. When Lenin died in 1924, Stalin stood by his coffin, presenting himself as the grieving disciple, the guardian of Lenin's legacy. It was a performance, and the world believed it. A fierce power struggle erupted. Leon Trotsky, brilliant and charismatic, seemed the natural successor. But Stalin maneuvered with quiet precision. He isolated Trotsky, discredited him, and eventually drove him into exile. One by one, Stalin eliminated rivals: Zinoviev, Kamenev, Bukharin, using accusations, show trials, and executions. By the late 1920s, Stalin held absolute power over the Soviet Union. Then came his revolution. He launched forced collectivization, seizing farmland from millions of peasants. Resistance was crushed. Entire villages starved. Millions died in what historians call one of the worst man-made famines in history. Yet Stalin pushed forward, believing sacrifice was necessary to transform the Soviet Union into an industrial superpower. Factories rose, steel production surged, railways expanded, and Stalin's portrait appeared everywhere, towering over schools, offices, and homes. The state built a cult around him: the father of nations, the genius of humanity, the man of steel. But behind the image lay paranoia. In the late 1930s, Stalin unleashed the Great Purge. Friends, generals, scientists, writers, even ordinary workers were arrested as enemies of the state. Torture extracted confessions. Secret trials condemned thousands. Execution squads worked day and night. No one felt safe. Even those closest to Stalin whispered carefully, fearing their words might be the last they ever spoke. Then came the greatest test of his rule, World War II. In 1941, Adolf Hitler launched a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. Millions of German troops swept across the borders, capturing cities and pushing deep into Soviet territory. Stalin was stunned. For days, he withdrew into seclusion, paralyzed by the betrayal. But when he re-emerged, he delivered a speech that rallied the nation. The Soviet people fought with unimaginable courage. They burned fields, sabotaged supply lines, and engaged in brutal street-to-street combat. The battles of Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad turned the war. At Stalingrad, a city that bore his name, Stalin ordered his forces to hold at any cost. The fighting was savage, the losses immense, but the Soviet victory marked a turning point in the war. By 1945, Soviet troops marched triumphantly into Berlin. Stalin emerged from the war as one of the most powerful leaders on earth, but victory only deepened his paranoia. As the Cold War began, Stalin tightened his grip over Eastern Europe, installing communist governments across the region. Inside the Soviet Union, he continued to rule through fear. His health declined. His suspicions grew. Even his closest allies worried that at any moment he might turn against them. In March 1953, Joseph Stalin suffered a stroke and collapsed on the floor of his private residence. For hours, no one dared enter his room. By the time doctors were called, it was too late. The man who ruled through terror for nearly 3 decades died in silence, surrounded not by family or friends, but by men who feared him more than they respected him. Millions mourned. Millions celebrated. And millions more wondered how one man had risen from a small Georgian town to command an empire spanning 11 time zones. Joseph Stalin left behind a legacy soaked in both industrial achievement and unimaginable suffering. His rule transformed a struggling nation into a superpower, but at a cost measured in human lives, broken families, and shattered dreams. His story remains a chilling reminder of how absolute power can twist ambition into tyranny, and how history can be shaped by a single, ruthless will.